The iron bars of the jail cells stood between 'em like the truth itself, cold, unforgiving, and impossible to ignore. Sheriff Daniel Cross gripped those bars until his knuckles went white, staring at the woman he'd sworn to love until his last breath. Sarah, his wife of 3 years, the woman who'd made his house a home, who'd kissed him goodbye every morning, who'd welcomed him back every night with a smile that could melt the hardest heart. And now she stood on the other side of those bars, her hands trembling, her eyes red from crying, wearing the same green dress she'd worn to their wedding. The fury in his chest burned hotter than the August sun. Not just anger, something worse, something that felt like his whole world cracking apart from the inside out. She'd stolen from him, from the town, from the very people he'd sworn to protect. The bank ledger sat on his desk behind him, every page a knife in his back. Forged signatures, missing funds, money that was supposed to feed widows and orphans, gone. And every trail led straight back to Sarah's handwriting, Sarah's planning, Sarah's betrayal. His voice came out like gravel scraping stone. He'd told her he'd trusted her with everything, his name, his reputation, his heart, and she'd taken it all and lit it on fire. Sarah's tears fell harder, but she didn't speak, couldn't speak. What words could possibly undo what she'd done? Then Daniel said the words that broke 'em both. He told her he wished he'd never met her, that the day he married her was the day his life ended. The silence that followed was so heavy it could have crushed mountains. And in that silence, Sarah whispered just 3 words. Words that changed everything, though Daniel couldn't hear him yet through the roar of his own pain. She said she'd done it all for him. Now let me ask you something, friend. If the person you loved most in this world destroyed your honor, your trust, your very name, would you stop long enough to ask why? Or would your pride and pain make you deaf to the truth? Justice is a hard rider. It don't bend, it don't wait, and sometimes it don't listen. But love asks the questions that hurt the most. And sometimes those questions lead to answers we never saw coming. 3 years earlier, Daniel Cross rode into the town of Redemption Ridge with one purpose: to bring law to a lawless place. He'd been a lawman for 12 years by then, moving from town to town, always alone. He'd learned early that a badge could make you powerful, but it couldn't keep you warm at night, couldn't give you a reason to come home. Until Sarah. She ran the general store her father left her, a modest place that sold everything from flour to rifle shells. The first time Daniel walked in, he was looking for coffee. What he found was a woman with sunset-red hair, sharp green eyes, and a smile that made him forget every reason he'd convinced himself to stay alone. She wasn't like other women he'd known. Sarah didn't giggle or flirt. She spoke her mind plainly, worked harder than most men, and had a kindness in her that felt rare in the frontier. They courted slowly. Walks after Sunday service, conversations on her porch while the sun went down. And gradually Daniel felt something he thought had died in him years ago: hope. When he asked her to marry him, she said yes with tears in her eyes.
She told him she'd been alone for so long and that he made her believe she didn't have to be anymore. Their wedding was simple. The whole town came. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Cross felt like he had something worth protecting beyond a badge. The first year was good, better than good. Sarah supported his work, even when it was dangerous. She never complained when he came home late, when the job took him away, when the weight of keeping the peace wore him down. But then, quietly, things began to change. Sarah started asking about money, about how much the town paid him, about the bank accounts he managed for the Widows and Orphans Fund, a fund the mayor had entrusted to Daniel because of his reputation for honesty. At first, Daniel didn't think much of it. They had bills, the store wasn't always profitable. It made sense she'd worry. But the questions kept coming, and Sarah grew distant. She'd lose herself in thought at the dinner table. She'd flinch when he asked if something was wrong. Then one day the mayor came to Daniel with a problem. Money was missing from the fund. Not a lot at first, just enough that it could have been a mistake. But when they looked closer, they found more discrepancies, forged withdrawal slips, falsified records. Daniel investigated like he would any crime, following every lead with cold precision. And every lead pointed to Sarah. It handwriting matched, the timing matched, the access matched. He didn't want to believe it. He fought against it with everything in him, but the evidence was a mountain he couldn't climb over. When he finally confronted her, she didn't deny it. She just closed her eyes and cried. He arrested her that night, in their own home, with his hand shaking so badly he could barely fasten the cuffs. He locked her in a cell and walked out of the jailhouse because if he stayed one more second, he'd have fallen apart. The town was in shock. The sheriff's wife, a thief. It was a scandal that burned through Redemption Ridge like wildfire. And Daniel felt like a fool, a blind, love-drunk fool who'd let a woman make a mockery of everything he stood for. But here's what Daniel didn't know. Here's what his pride and pain kept him from seeing. Sarah had a younger brother, Tommy, a boy of 19, wild and reckless, who'd gotten himself tangled up with the wrong men, gamblers and outlaws who operated just outside the law's reach. Tommy owed them money, a lot of money, and when he couldn't pay, they told him they'd kill him, slowly, painfully. Sarah begged Tommy to go to the sheriff, to Daniel, but Tommy refused. He was ashamed, terrified, and he swore Sarah to secrecy, made her promise she wouldn't tell a soul, especially not her lawman husband. So Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She took the money. She forged the papers. She betrayed the man she loved to save the boy who was all the family she had left. She'd planned to pay it back, every cent. She had been selling off her father's land piece by piece, quietly, hoping Daniel wouldn't notice until the debt was settled. But the mayor had discovered the missing funds too soon, and now Sarah sat in a cell, unable to defend herself without condemning her brother to death.
3 days passed. 3 days of Daniel pacing his office, refusing to see Sarah, refusing to hear her beg for a chance to explain. The trial was set, the judge was coming, and the whole town waited to see justice done. But on the third night, a young man stumbled into the jailhouse, beaten and bloodied. It was Tommy. The men he owed had come for him. They'd beaten him half to death and left him in the street as a message. He crawled to the jailhouse because he knew his sister was there, and he couldn't let her take the fall anymore. Through split lips and broken teeth, Tommy told Daniel everything. About the debt, the threats, Sarah's desperate plan, her sacrifice. Daniel stood there, frozen, as the truth shattered everything he thought he knew. Sarah hadn't betrayed him out of greed or deceit. She'd betrayed him out of love, out of a desperate, impossible choice between her brother's life and her husband's trust. Daniel ran to her cell, threw open the door, and for the first time in 3 days he truly looked at her. She was thinner, exhausted, broken. And when their eyes met, she didn't say a word. She just waited to see if the man she loved could forgive the woman who'd ruined his life. Daniel knelt down in front of her, took her hands in his, and he told her he was sorry. Sorry for not listening. Sorry for letting his pride deafen him to the questions he should have asked. Sorry for believing the worst of her when she'd only shown him her best. Sarah collapsed into his arms, and they held each other like two people who'd almost lost everything. The next morning, Daniel went to the mayor. He told him the truth, every word. The mayor was furious at first. The law had been broken, and that couldn't be ignored. But he was also a man who understood that justice without mercy is just cruelty in a robe. They worked out a plan. Sarah would repay the money through labor, through the sale of her remaining land, through whatever it took. Tommy would face consequences for his debts, but under the sheriff's protection, the outlaws who threatened him were hunted down and driven out of the territory. It took 2 years. 2 hard, humbling years of work and sacrifice. But Daniel and Sarah rebuilt their life together, stronger than before, because they learned something the frontier doesn't often teach. That trust isn't the absence of mistakes. It's the choice to seek the truth even when the pain tries to blind you. That love isn't perfect people living perfect lives. It's flawed people choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard. And that sometimes the person who ruins your life is also the person who saves it, if you're brave enough to let 'em. So that's the tale of Sheriff Daniel Cross and the woman who ruined his life. Or saved it. Depends on how you look at it. If this story stirred something in your heart, then don't write off just yet. There are more stories waiting beneath the western sun. Tales of love, betrayal, and lessons learned the hard way. Subscribe to Frontier Love Tales, where every story reminds us that love still rides, even across the roughest frontier. Because out here, the truth is simple. Love ain't easy, but it's always worth fighting for.